I need to have it higher? Sure. All right. Well, good evening, everybody. I'd like to thank Father Kabaza for allowing me the opportunity to address you tonight. My name is Deacon Justin Mitchell. I'm based at the Catholic Church of the Resurrection in Memphis, Tennessee. And as I get into everything, I will explain a lot to you as to who I am, why I do what I do, the role of the deacon, the permanent deacon in the Catholic Church, because let me ask you, I'm sorry, are you a seminarian or are you an associate? Awesome. And because that's important. Your role is awesome. I get fired up when I see you guys because I'm an old guy and you're a young guy, so that always makes me feel better. But what we're going to talk about is essentially the theology of the deacon, but I'm going to start it off by letting you know how we're going to get to all the points. First of all, we're going to talk about the foundations. I'll give you my foundation, which is not that significant. Then I'm going to give you what formation means. And I'm going to call it formation through divine revelation. Okay, because all of us are part of the divinity of Christ. Sometimes we don't realize it, but we are. Then I'm going to get into the theology of the deacon, who we are, the theology of the permanent deacon. Because there's a difference between a transitional deacon and a permanent deacon. And then I'm going to tell you what it is for me in my ministry. So, everybody that's in this room and everybody that's affecting us who are watching, everybody has a starting point in life. Everybody, no matter who you are, you're born, you evolve, you get raised, and then there's a starting point. That journey of 1,000,000 miles that starts with the first step. I started kindergarten in September of 1961. Everybody said, oh, Lord, this is going to be long. He's going to tell us everything. No, that's not it. But I started kindergarten in September of 1961. And that date is significant because that was the day, the first day of school, the first day of my life, I met her. We have been married a long time. So when people ask me, how long have you been married? I say forever. But we met the first day of school, the first day of my life. We were both 5 years old. 5 years old. So in 1962, something happened. We were in first grade, but something bigger than that happened. October 11th, 1962, Vatican Council began. Pope John the 23rd opened up the Vatican Council. So we were in first grade, the Vatican Council opens up. So as I get along further in this discussion, I'll tell you what the relevance to that is. Okay? So by the time we were in fourth grade, Vatican II was winding down. And I'll explain to you about different Vatican councils and why Vatican II was different than the others, okay? But the big take-home message in Vatican II was what was going on? Vietnam War, assassination of John F. Kennedy, civil rights. A lot of things were happening in the volatility of the world, and the Catholic Church was moving in stride. So essentially what Vatican II did was it changed the world. And especially the world as we see it. So going back to me and my wife, the nuns that taught us at St. David's Elementary School in New Orleans, Louisiana, asked all the time, what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to do when you grow up? And invariably, because of Vatican II, what did we want to do? Change the world. Every time the nuns would ask us that, change the world. I'm sitting in the classroom and say, oh, I don't know the answer to this. Oh, change the world. Okay, good. So I didn't think at that time that that was that significant. The nuns, the sisters of the presentation, were so passionate about moving us forward. So we said we wanted to change the world. So my personal Catholic upbringing was very strong to me. And at the ripe old age of 14, I told my parents that I wanted to become a priest. I told my parents I wanted to become a priest at the ripe old age of 14. So they blew me off for a while. And then I went on a retreat. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. How many Catholics, is everybody in this room Catholic right now? I just want to ask. All right. So there was a retreat in Louisiana called Teens Encounter Christ, tech retreats. And my wife hates me for this because my memory, I remember these things. I went to Tech 81 in Marywood, Louisiana. And for me, it kind of ruined me for moving on in my life because of the fact that I was Catholicized at that retreat. First time I went to Eucharistic adoration, the first time I had actually dealt with individuals from every denomination, Catholic denomination, all races and creeds. Everybody was there, and they were all young like me. And it's the first time, don't take this personal for the provisor, but I met a cool priest. That priest was cool, man. He played music, he played the guitar, man. And I said, whoa, this is me. I have found it. So I got Catholicized. So what happened? I'm moving into junior high and high school, the time of experimentation in the early 70s. And I'm geeked out because I have this influence of Catholicism in me. But at the age of 14, after I went to the retreat, again, I talked to my parents, I want to be a priest. I want to be a priest. So my parents, they had 8 of us. So this was big. My mom and my dad took me in the bedroom, and they sat me on the bed, and they told me about the G word. And it wasn't God, it was girls. So they did not talk me out of becoming a priest, but they said, why don't you wait until after you finish high school? That was a compromise. And then come and talk to us about it then. So I did. And the reason in the beginning of discussion I talked about Vatican II, and the parallel to my life was prior to Vatican II, for 1,200 years, 1,200 years, there was no permanent diaconate. What happened? Now, permanent diaconate is what I am. It's what her husband is here, Ms. Cusio and her husband. We're permanent deacons. But we have a seminarian in here, and eventually he and Father Provaza were transitional deacons. Did you know that all priests are ordained deacons? So, but they're transitional deacons, so they move on. As a permanent deacon, this is it. I hit the roadblock. Boom! Now, well, I'll explain it now. So what happens? As a permanent deacon, what does that mean? It means that my faculties, based upon canon law, are limited. But the important thing is that for me, I can marry. It is the only ministry in Catholicism where you can be married and ordained. And these women, because they went to formation at St. Myra, they know the secret handshakes. All right, this is what the priests do. No. So, because there are deacon wives. But anyway, as a deacon, I can not at this point, if anything, if my wife should precede me, I cannot remarry, and I must lead a celibate life. So permanent deacons, and I know that you're in probation, have to take a vow of celibacy. Did you know that? Real interesting. So I protect my wife a whole lot. She gets her health benefits. She's got good insurance. I put her in a bubble. You know, she's good. Okay. All right. So, and I'll tell you the first deacon I saw. The first deacon I saw, and I remembered his name, and that's just going to forget right, his Deacon Williams. I was about 16 years old when I was at the Catholic church that we graduated from, and I was in church with my sister. And it's the reason I remember this deacon clearly because of something that happened. So I see this guy walking up the aisle. I didn't know what he was. He had the clothes like a priest, but I knew he wasn't a priest because nobody explained to us what he was. So he goes up to the altar, and the priest sits down, and he starts preaching. And it was impressive to see because he was an older gentleman, as a lot of us deacons tend to be. And he said, please stay away from sin. Stay away from sex. And especially stay away from fornication. What in the world was going on? And my sister sitting next to me, bust out laughing in church. So the church wakes up and they look at me. I'm pointing at her because she's the one laughing. But he said, fornication. And I said, whatever that is, I don't want to get it. But anyway, that's how I remember the first deacon I have ever met. So, the foundation of my faith is deeply rooted in the Catholic Church. My faith is deeply rooted in the Catholic Church. But the realities of the secular life begin and tend to shape the direction of your faith. Have you all ever felt that the secular world kind of starts nipping on your shoulder? So though you're good Catholics, you realize that, oh, is this really sinful? Is this really something I need to do? So they tend to shape the direction of your faith. And this is when I'm going to move into the second phase, which is formation through divine revelation. Throughout high school and college, I maintained a reasonable Catholic lifestyle. However, I felt that my faith was not based upon doctrine, but on how the Catholic faith fit my lifestyle. So I was the prototypical cafeteria Catholic. The things about the Catholic faith that I liked, it goes on the tray. The things about the Catholic faith that I really didn't like, because that's how the world was moving. Very relativistic, and that's a whole other different talk. Actually, we were talking relativism, but that's a whole different talk because of the fact that I picked and choose the type of Catholic that I felt I wanted to be. So I attended Mass regularly. I received the sacraments intermittently. And if I was in a parish, I typically served in that parish some. Okay? But life changed for me dramatically. And it changed from the girl of my dreams, the girl I met the first day of school in my life. The girl I ever always thought was the prettiest, sweetest, cutest girl in the world. Said yes when I asked her to marry me. That's her right there. With all sincerity, and before God and one of my priests, she's the only girl on earth I ever wanted to marry. And God saw fit to give her to me. And I'm humbled by that. So we got married August the 2nd of 1980. And on August the 16th, 1981, we welcomed our first little bundle of joy. Kristen, my daughter Kristen, was born. And oh my God. You know, as a proud papa, you always say, my kid is so, that girl was so doggone gorgeous, I just don't know what to do. Woo, that's a pretty little baby girl. Anyway. But, and she was a product of our love. I adored that child. and I still do. She was the apple of my eye and could do no wrong. I felt that she was something special. And though we have other children, and I love them all, something was special about her. Also, something else was going on because we were newly married. We got married in 1980, and I was into my career in pharmaceuticals, and my career was taking off. And I had been given an opportunity to move to Columbus, Ohio, for a job with a major pharmaceutical company, and it was a position of prominence. I was a national director of training for the company, and I was something special. Let me tell you something. You couldn't touch me. I'm special. That was good. Okay, and then from Columbus, we moved to Memphis, and I was supposed to be a transitional move to Memphis for 3 years. I would come into this little district that I had to run, pat everybody on the butt for a little bit, and then move on to Louisiana for the real job I wanted. So we were transitioning into Memphis. We were putting our kids in school, went to a fantastic church, the Catholic Church of the Incarnation, which is still very, very special to me. And we went to Incarnation, got our kids in school and everything. And then all of a sudden, we had a family member that called us. And they said, y'all better be careful and y'all better watch Kristen because we think Kristen's pregnant. Man, I thought that was a cruel joke. But come to find out, our 14-year-old daughter was pregnant. So, what do you do? Everything up to this point was, man, we had that Madison Avenue family. Everything was perfect. And then this happens. So, we go to an OBGYN to get the checkup. That's the only checkup that I went to with my daughter and my wife. She's sitting on the bed in the office. My wife's sitting in the corner, and the doctor's doing an examination, and she says, well, yes, she's pregnant. She's with child. So she says, well, you know, she's young, and she's not showing. What about an abortion? So guess what Daddy says? Me, smart man. Doctor, I think that's a good idea. Let's do an abortion. And we basically thought we'd come to the consensus, and then all of a sudden, in the corner of the room, sitting in that chair, this little young lady states in a very forceful manner, abortion is not an option. My usually compliant wife, my usually submissive wife, my usually obedient wife said, abortion is not an option. So the doctor looks at me. I'm looking at this beautiful girl sitting on this table who seems to be so perfect. She has a life ahead of her. So my rationale was purely worldly. But that angel said, abortion. So we opted not to. But remember, I was the one that said I wanted it. So, for the next 7 months, I treated my daughter like crap. I wouldn't hug her. I wouldn't hold her. I wouldn't talk to her. I wouldn't entertain any conversation as far as I'm concerned, because I'm special. I'm somebody super duper. I'm the man. I've got this thing licked. I'm a special executive, and this is what this child does to me. In the meantime, my beautiful wife was taking her to the doctor's appointment, but she also took her to another place called Life Choices. And this is a place that dealt with women, young girls who was in that situation. So this angel was taking care of the things that Dad was not participating in. Dad wasn't there. So when we said we wanted to, when she said abortion is not an option, the doctor looked at me and I looked at, and the doctor had a very quizzical look on her. So, one day, I had my office at home, and I was standing by the window of my office, and my daughter was getting off of the school bus. And when she came off the school bus, I was looking, she had on a blue jean shirt outfit. The right strap was broken. She was big and pregnant and couldn't fasten it. She pulled her book bag off the bus. I was trying to drag it across the yard. And I found myself on my face. And I said to myself, my Lord and my God. Same words that Thomas said when he put his hand in Jesus' hand. I don't know how I got flat on my face. That moment was the moment I became Catholic. That was the moment that Jesus revealed himself to me in my Didymus Thomas moment. And he told me, you ain't crap, you're nothing. That the life you live is a facade. You've been playing with my name. And this is what you've done. So I ran down the steps as fast as I could. And I grabbed my little girl. And I hugged her. And I kissed her. And I told her how much I loved her and how much I missed her. And that's when we began to forge our relationship. But brothers and sisters, that wasn't the end of it. You see, my wife had been going to this woman, and she'd been giving her information about her choice of the doctor. And when she would leave, she says, I'm just putting it out there, what can I do? It's just nothing. 3 years later, my wife received a phone call from the OB doctor. She said, because of what you said in my office that day, I never performed another abortion, and I turned my life over to Jesus Christ. True story, she's still practicing in this town. So she says, I am going to present my testimony through Life Choices because I'm on the board of Life Choices now. The place she didn't think. And she says, I would like for you to bring Brennan and Krista as my guests for my testimony, because that's what changed my life. So they went there, and I wasn't there. I was in a hotel room in Chicago. She told me about it, and I just cried my eyes out, because when they brought them on stage, the little kids who were not aborted, they all had a little shirt. And the shirt said, I chose life because life chose me. I chose life because life chose me. And I just remember when he was born, the day my little grandson Brennan was born, we were in the hospital. And the reason I know exactly what was going on, because the gold medal ceremony for the green team was on the TV. And I was watching that until that baby came, because it was kind of mushy. But anyway, that's what happened. But you would think that would end because of the conversion of our life. Although Brennan was a firecracker, boy, he was a mess. And he grew up, and he was just all kind of everything. He loved to dance and do all kind of things. However, Brennan was always a little troubled kid. His daddy wasn't present, and I would take him to trips with me to be his sponsor, his dad. He turned from being my grandson to being my friend. But Brennan had struggles. And one day, B and I had gone to dinner with Father Parham, Father Ben Bradshaw, and a couple of our other friends on January the 18th. And we had one of the best times we could ever have. We got home and we thought, boy, that was a wonderful day. And then we got a phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning and said Brennan was in the hospital. He was 19 years old. So we went to the hospital, and Brennan had overdosed on opioids. And he was unconscious. So what we did was we realized that his life was in the balance. He was in a coma. And when it comes down to priests, I want to give you a quick little update as to why I feel the way I feel about priests. And I'm going to go back early to this point. When I was 8 years old, my youngest brother died from complications from diabetes. This was in the time of the Mass where the priests turned around, the old Latin Mass. But I was an 8-year-old kid, and I was devastated. But when I looked at the priest, and he turned around for the elevation, he had tears rolling down his face. That's the first time that I saw a priest. His love for my family was so strong that he was hurting just like we were hurting. I said, wow, that meant a lot to me. About a year and a half later, in New Orleans, there was Hurricane Betsy. Big hurricane. We were in the worst portion of the area hit, and we had to evacuate. And on the porch of St. David's Catholic Church, that was before the days of the foam ice chest. He had a big metal ice chest. The priest, Father Paul Fruitful, was giving the people if they were evacuated. He wasn't evacuated. He emptied his refrigerator out, and he was giving people food and water. He didn't leave. Wow, that's a priest. That's the priest I know. Then there was a Father Norton. I used to be the head of the youth group at that school. And when Father Norton came to town, little bitty guy looked like Spacey Sparks. If you ever saw the Jetsons, he looked like Spacey. He was short guy, bald-headed. Somebody broke into the rectory and slit his throat. But he didn't die. And that man still continued to walk the streets of that neighborhood. And that's the priest that taught me what it was to be a man. That was a man. That was strength. Those were the priests. And my daughter went to Incarnation Church. The pastor was Father Cantner. And I was so distant from her that when she walked in the church, Father Cantner stopped her one time, big and pregnant. She had her head down. And he lifted her head up. And he said, young child, everybody here sees the sin you committed. But there's a lot of people in there who have sins that you can't see. Hold your head up. He took my baby girl. It was the man that I wanted. That was my priest. So let's go back to Brennan and I. When we realized that it wasn't going to be good for him, we called Father Ben, who was the pastor at the time, and he had me over at Resurrection before I was a deacon, and he did the last rites. And after he did the last rites, people did not realize that he and my daughters were close on their own. He had a relationship with my children away from me. So when he did the last rites, he did them. He was so hurt, he ran out. And I felt so bad because I put my friend in that situation, not realizing that he would be as hurt as much as we were. That's the priest I know. And then the last one, before we get there, when I was at the hospital, we was at St. Francis, and Father Callis would come to the hospital, and Father Callis would be shuffling down the hallways, and he said, why are you here? Because we do something at Villa Vienna, but we're not going to get into that every year. But he was doing that, and he said, I was talking about my grandson. He said, okay, don't worry about it. I'll pray for him. So about half an hour later, I walked up to the room and saw one of the most beautiful sights I've ever seen. Father Callis was sitting by the bed with my grandson's hand in his, praying for him. I'll never forget that image, because to me, that was the vision of Christ. Shortly thereafter, on December 23rd, 5 years ago, Brennan died. my grandson. And I realized something at that point. See, for the kid that I wanted to have aborted, the kid that I didn't want to make it, the kid that I said, let's do this abortion, I'd have walked in front of a train for that child. But through divine revelation, we found out something else about it. See, when that doctor stopped performing abortions, think about how many children lived because of those 5 words. Think about the lives that were saved. And look at her life. She came into the church because of 5 simple words. It wasn't about a major protest. It wasn't about protesting in front of the building. It was about love. So what happened to Brennan? Brennan died. But you see, we did not know this. Brennan signed up to be on the transplant list. 8 people received his organs. When my daughter Kristen got married, the woman that received his heart walked up the aisle at her wedding. My grandson was there. He was there. Because of the generosity, not only did he save those children, but look how many of the lives this insignificant little overdose dying child. Man. But then there was the divine revelation. And it seems like it took a long time to get here, but this is what happened. You see, the reason that we're talking about deacons and the reason that I am a deacon today is because of the life I wanted to take. I gave him mine. That's why I'm here. And he got the short end of the stick. So sometimes, through divine revelation, God guides us to a place that we may not have ordinarily gone to had we not had these hiccups in life. And the good thing about Brendan, my daughter is doing fantastic. She is awesome. She's doing real well, as a matter of fact. And the only thing that gives me heartache is that she's got a hole in her heart that we can't fix. So every time I see my baby, it hurts me because I know that she's got that hole in her heart. But you know what? Jesus loves us. Through it all, Jesus has moved us to that place where we need to be. So at his eulogy, at his funeral, there was a cross I wore on my neck, and I will not wear another cross until Jesus takes me. I wore it for 9 years. It's exactly the same cross you have on, exactly the same cross. Exactly the same cross. And when he died, I put the cross on him. My daughter asked me to put the cross on him. And the reason I put the cross on him is because of the fact that I wasn't being that generous. When I see him again, I want my cross back. And I will. So the reason I call this formation is because up until that time, I played Catholic. I was Catholic in name only. Through these circumstances, I became Catholic. And I'm so proud of the fact that he, through his death, saw me through my failure, and he still loved me. I ain't nothing special. I ain't nothing to brag about. But he loves me, and I know it. So because he loves me, so I love you. I love you. One of the greatest testimonies I got from a priest, one of the most beautiful homilies I've ever heard, was from Father Bill Paul. And we had gone to a retreat. And Bill was in front of Father Paul was in front of the altar, and he was teary, he was crying. And he says, brothers and sisters, I realize what my role is as a priest. And he says, my job is to love you. Do we have the courage to love. Because you see, everybody sitting here and everybody watching, do you realize that nothing that I said tonight is about me? It's about you. It's about you. Do you have the courage to love? You haven't failed like me. So you still have that opportunity through praise and grace to be a part of what it is that God has chosen you to be. My job is to reveal it to you. You don't want to be me because I'm broken. But God loves you, and he's fixing me. He's working on me. He's got a lot of epoxy and a lot of crazy glue and stuff, but he's working on me. But this is about you. And my love for you is why I can tell you what we want. So the reason that I'm a deacon today is because I promised Jesus something, and I fulfilled it. So in the ministry of deacon, it has a very special meaning to me. It has a special passion and a special purpose because I failed. I wish I'd have been as strong as my beautiful wife, but based upon her love for me and our child, we're here tonight. Think about I failed and he loves me. Think about how he loves you. Think about how he's embracing you with his loving arms. Never lose sight of Jesus' love for you because he took me, a sinner, and called me to become a deacon. Wow. I'm his most unworthy servant. But Lord, I am his servant. Let me tell you something. I love my Jesus. So, I'm a deacon because of that. But let's talk now about what is the theology of a deacon. I'm sorry. It's tough to do. But the theology, now this is going to be a little bit geeky, but it's clear for your understanding. And I'm going to get through it, okay? The theology of the permanent deacon was reestablished by the bishops attending Vatican II as a major part of the sacrament of orders. And if you wanted to look it up, it's in Lumen Gentium 29, which is the divine teachings of the Catholic Church, divine message of the Catholic Church. I'm messing that up. And it represented a major moment in the life of the contemporary Catholic Church. Remember when Vatican II started, Pope John the 23rd started it, but he died. So Pope Paul VI actually ended it. And in both his apostolic letter, which is Sacram Diaconatus Ordinum on June 18th of 1967, and the reason I'm putting these dates out here is a reason, because I'm going to bring it back to you, and his subsequent Mortu Proprio. That's a fancy word for basically the Pope said, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it on my own volition without no help. That's a Mortu Proprio, okay? It was ad facendum on August 15th, 1972, established the basic source of legislation for the permanent deacon. So what year was that? 1972. So how long have there been permanent deacons from the 1200-year period? A little over 50 some odd years, right? So the permanent deacon, the permanent diaconate is relatively new, as it was reestablished in Vatican II from 1,200 years of nothing. So what happened 1,200 years ago? Think about how the church was 1,200 years ago. If you look at it, and I'm going to read you some things about other, like Paul and a few other people, you had the episcopacy, which is the bishop, and you had the diaconate. So what was missing? The presbytery, the priest. So as the priests got more involved in the service to the church, they didn't feel the need for the permanent deacon because the priests were all transitional deacons. So it's not that they canceled it, they just didn't have a need for it. So the church fathers decided, let's revisit this. And that's what happened in 1972. So, in the apostolic letter containing norms of the order of diaconate, and this is what a deacon is, in the early church, the Apostle Paul, in his letter to the Philippians, sent greetings not only to bishops, but to deacons as well. No presbyterate at the time. Remember, you're talking Paul, and Paul, his letters were before the apostle. You're talking about 68 AD. Okay? So with Paul's letters to the deacons illustrated the qualities and virtues that the deacon must have in order to be worthy of this ministry. The early writers stated that the qualities of virtues of the ministry of deacon is this: one, fidelity to Christ; two, moral integrity; and the most important one, and we still follow this up today, and I'll explain to you why, obedience to the bishop. I don't know, Father Pavaz, if he tried to get rid of his deacons, he could say, God, hey, Joe Cusio, go. And Joe could go, whoop, 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 whoop. But if the bishop says, Joe Cusio, go, he said, where to? Now, the priest can recommend it, but ultimately the bishop makes the assignment that the deacon has to follow. But that changed. And I'm going to explain to you why. Because, again, I'm a priest guy. So if my priest told me to go, I'm out. But technically, under the rules, you don't necessarily have to do that. Okay? St. Ignatius of Antioch declares that the office of the deacon is nothing other than the ministry, I love this, of Jesus Christ. So what was Jesus Christ? The Lamb of God. He was the ultimate servant. And remember, in the 1500s, the Council on Trent was that organization that made a determination that we must have an educated presbyterate, episcopacy, and diaconate. So that's when the education came in. However, we shouldn't be confused by that. How many times in Scripture have people talked about the dynamic mind of Jesus? How many times have people talked about Jesus' intellectual well-being? How many times, do you ever hear that? Or what did they talk about? The what of Jesus? La corazón del Padre, the heart of Jesus. We've got a class with deacons coming in right now. We have a lot of Hispanic gentlemen in the class, and many of them do not have a lot of formal education. Does that disqualify you? No. So when we talk about intelligence, it's the capacity to be called by God and have his divine revelation presented to you. Duality, quickly. Are we human people living a spiritual life? Or are we spiritual beings living a human life? Ever thought about that? We are spiritual. Relativism in the world that's corrupting a lot of the ways we look at things. And relativism basically says if it feels good, if it does good, and I judge it to be good in my mind, it's good, without a foundation. Catholicism is foundational. That's why religion is so good. So the point is, we have to take care of the foundations of the church and support them if we want to make sure that the church still exists. All right? So what is the deacon, the permanent deacon? The deacon is the visible image and service of Christ, sacramentalized. If you saw me coming out of a ballroom drunk, if you saw me chasing women down the street or something like that, what would that do to your faith? How would you feel about Catholicism? So we have an obligation to be better, to show the world that it is good to be good and to be honorable to the foundations of Catholicism. And St. Polycarp of Smyrna exhorts deacons to be moderate in all things. He didn't say over the top. He said moderate in all things, merciful, all things diligent, live according to the truth of the Lord, who became who to all? Jesus became a servant to all. You know, at the Last Supper, Jesus was having issues with a person that was kind of like me, kind of dumb, kind of slow. And that was this fellow called Peter. When Jesus went to wash the feet, Peter said, "No, if you wash my feet, you got to wash everything." And Jesus said, "What's wrong with that boy?" So then Peter said, "I'm going to have to die. If you die, Jesus, I'm dying with you. Let's go. I'm tough. Let's go." And Jesus said, "I don't know what's wrong with that boy." I said, "Look, dude, before this night is over, you're going to deny me 3 times for the cock crows twice, okay?" And Peter said, and Jesus walked away. I can imagine Jesus, "Oh, Lord, I got to go through this, and then I got him." No, but the reason I do it like that is because that's me, the failure. And what did Jesus do with him? "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I build my church." But as you go down further in the same scripture, he tells Peter, "Get you behind me, Satan." But what the heck, you know. So the whole point is that we can see Jesus in our weakness because are we human beings living a spiritual life? Or are we spiritual beings living human life? Our humanness tends to trump our spirituality. But I'm going to tell you something, and I'm going to make sure you know it because I don't want you to forget it. You are all divinely inspired and developed by Jesus Christ. You are spiritual beings. And as you tap into that, you become closer to him. That's why adoration is so important. That's why the Missa, the Mass is so important. Because that's how you tap into that spiritual side that's going to guide you, and everybody here to eternity. And as I move on, the deacon is described as the pastor's ear, mouth, heart, and soul. The bishop's ear, mouth, heart, and soul. The deacon is at the disposal of the bishop in order that he may serve the whole people of God and take care of the sick and the poor. And he is correctly called the one who shows love. The deacon is the one who shows love for orphans, for the devout, for the widowed, and one who is fervent in spirit, and one who shows love for what is good. You know, a lot of times when you talk about a kid that's done something bad, everybody says when a bad kid does something good, you celebrate that. But what about the good kid that doesn't do anything bad? How would you feel? Good. We have to celebrate the good too. Society kind of teaches us not to do that. And if a deacon wants to get the big head because of his service, Lumen Gentium, which is apostolic direction of the church, says at the lower end of the hierarchy are the deacons, who receive the imposition of hands, not unto the priesthood, not unto the priesthood. So we ain't minor priests. The priest here, deacon here. And that's a good thing. I'm not being demeaning, but the priest has to be there. For strengthened by sacrament of grace, they are dedicated to the people of God in conjunction with the bishop. And this is why I support my priest so much, because it doesn't say just to the bishop and his body of priests. That's what the law says. Okay? In the service of the liturgy of the gospel and works of charity. Okay? So the duties are so necessary for the life of the church that they're designed to be fulfilled with difficulty. It tells you with difficulty, because the intent of our actions is to show people that even in the tough times, that the Spirit of Christ continues to guide us so that you can be able to have the confidence to continue in your faith. Okay? Thus, the theology of the deacon, reestablished, is summarized by 2 words: service and obedience. Theologically, the deacon can perform marriages, which I've done, officiate at funerals, which I have done, baptize, a couple of them this weekend, and preach. But preach, and this is where a lot of deacons get confused, with the expressed approval of the ordinary of the parish or diocese. So if Father Favazza says, "Justin, you can come here, but you can't preach," yes, Father. That's it. Obviously, as you preach I preach English every third weekend, and I preach in Spanish every fourth week. I do a Spanish homily, and an English homily. I know y'all surprised, yeah, but it happens every night. The Hispanics tend not to be surprised because they get confused when I start talking. But anyway. So, we are the visible example of Christ in the church and are responsible for bringing the good news to everyone we touch. So I just want to say something in closing, a couple of things in closing. First, y'all were at church yesterday, right? Did you hear yesterday's gospel? Everything that I went through was ordained for me to be at this point, this night, this day, everything. From that day in September of 1961 to this moment was ordained for me to be here, everybody here tonight. And in the gospel, yesterday it says, you did not choose me. I chose you. So that you might bear fruit that will last. And so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give. Amen. Now, one of the things that thought of us is just a few minutes on the ministry. My particular ministry as a deacon, I just want to let you know what I do. I work with St. Vincent de Paul. We do the Mid-South Food Bank every second weekend, where we deal with at least 500 families. We come through the line and we do that every weekend. I teach RCIA. I bring people into the church. I do regular talks. I have a variety of different things. One of them is cookies and catechism, which is taking people through the catechism of the Catholic Church, and it takes a few weeks for me to do that one. I also do one on relativism, which is who am I to judge? And it's also, and it's who am I to judge? Why going to church is important. That's another talk. I did that one last year, but year before that's because of COVID, I haven't done it. I work with Deacon formation, as we have one of our candidates right here today, which is good. We got a seminarian and a diaconate candidate, so this is great. And I preach in English and Spanish liturgy, and I work with a lot of the Hispanics in my population. But one of the things that my wife wanted me to tell you is the fact that deacon formation takes 5 years. They know real well. It's a year of aspirancy and 4 years of formation. It probably is a little longer for you as a seminarian, but that's what this young man, Mrs. Smothers, is going to have to contend with. And it's important that we have the 5 years. We are the second class that's seminary trained. We go to St. Meinrad Seminary. We're only the second class in the history of the diaconate here that has gone to seminary. So we think that that's a good thing. And whenever you see the Pope on television, and he's got this entourage of people around him, what is the other name for the Pope? He's the Bishop of Rome. So who's around him? Deacons. How do you know they're deacons? She's going to say, how's that? Key thing, and this is a trivia question. If ever you saw, if I'm serving, if the bishop comes to my church, and I've served with the bishop 5 times in the past 8 weeks, because I do the Spanish Mass with him. Why am I there? I serve the bishop, but how can you tell? We have sleeves. If you see a deacon, we have sleeves. A priest has a chasuble, which has no sleeves. A deacon has sleeves, which is a dogmatic. And that's how you can actually, so if you see the bishop, you see a guy with the sleeves on, hey, that's a deacon. So now, everybody doesn't know that. And then the other thing is that she said, well, why do we wear gray? And now every diocese, many dioceses, even in Indiana, like St. Meinrad, their deacons do not wear what we call clerics. They won't let them wear clerics. So we wear gray because we're between the world in God. So we're in between. That's why seminarians and priests were black. That's it. Now you see, didn't know that, huh? So if Father Provisor doesn't put the garbage out at night, it's good. If I don't put the garbage out at night, I get hit in the head with a rolling pin because I got a wife. So I want to thank you for this opportunity to make this presentation to you. Hopefully I didn't run too long. And I want to pray that the Spirit of Jesus descend upon you, guide you, protect you this day and all the days of the rest of your life. May you all, when you sojourn to your home, be protected from all hurt, harm, and danger that may come your way. In Christ's name we pray. I am wide open. Okay, good. Yes. Okay. Oh. All right. Yes, sir. My pleasure. No, I do a Spanish mass. I preach. I'm sorry. I preach in Spanish